All right, what's going on, guys? So a lot of questions that we get people that are researching moving to Arizona or Florida. This is Jerry Niesman. He's a broker in South Florida. Of course, I'm a broker in the Phoenix metro area, and we cover Scottsdale, Tempe, Gilbert, Chandler, all of it. But we want to talk to you a little bit about pros and cons and differences between Florida and Arizona, because as you know, a lot of people, we have a lot of the same clients. I get phone calls with from people in Minnesota, Chicago, even New York. Obviously, Florida is a lot closer than New York. It's just a quick flight down the coast, but we have a lot of snowbirds in the Phoenix area, and so I'm trying to figure out what is the difference between the two. Why do people choose one over the other? Like, it surprises me, but actually, since I live in Arizona, I'm not surprised why people come to Arizona. But like, Florida's great, but like, we're gonna talk a little bit about the differences. So like, we'll start off with you, Florida. Like, why would somebody want to choose Florida over Arizona? Like, let's kind of just talk about a couple of the things that you know from your clients and experience.
Well, I may have a little bit different perspective because I've lived in both places, because I grew up in Phoenix, but and why did I move to Florida? Which I was lucky enough to always have lived in the warm places, but yeah, most of our clients come down from the north. They're trying to get away from the cold. So climate, number one, obviously we both have warm climates. Very big differences between the two. In yours is warm and dry. Mine is more warm and wet. So, you've got the humidity in Florida for sure. However, the winter months, when the majority of our, at least the snowbird population, a lot of people like to do the half the time up north, half the time down south. So that snowbird population, when they come down in the winter, it is dry. It's like all of our rain happens in the summer months. So the weather is fantastic in the winter months when the majority of the people are down. It's typically in the 70s, 80s. Sometimes it gets into the 90s. The humidity is lower, although it is still humid, but that just means that, you don't get bloody noses.
And I kind of flipped that around a little bit. I grew up in the north, in a little bit more humid area, and I actually came from north. Before I was in Arizona, I was in North Dakota, where it does get quite humid in the summertime. The only reason I think it's so dry in the winter is just because it's so cold, obviously. But the bloody nose thing,
it's one of those things. When I go back now, if I'm there for more than 3 or 4 days, I start to get them, which I never had a bloody nose as a kid.
It takes a couple of days to get used to the dryness for some people. I think that for the first week or two is definitely an adjustment, but
once you're
there, your body adjusts to it, just like any other area. The humid versus not humid thing. Like, obviously Arizona, it rains like 20 days a year. It's bright blue skies every day. My favorite thing about waking up in the morning is going out in the patio early in the morning and watching the sunrise come up, and there's no gray, hazy anything. It's just crisp blue sky with the sun coming in. You got your coffee. Of course, in the wintertime, we do have winter just like Florida, but it might be a little chilly in the winter in the morning. December, January, so you kick on the patio heater and you're sitting there with your hot coffee, and it's just perfect morning. That's kind of my favorite thing, and it's dry. I'm not, especially if as people get older, a lot of them maybe get a little overweight or something, and walking around with that, the sweatiness and stuff.
They're not supposed to, though. All the outdoor activities that we have in both places.
I know, golfing is huge, but that's a real comment that I've gotten from people is they love the dry weather just because it's more comfortable. Like, you don't feel like, you lived in both places, but like the biggest complaint that I hear from people that chose Arizona over Florida is that when they get out of the shower and they go outside, they don't feel like they just got back in the shower. They actually feel clean and dry.
Yeah, but that's only in the summertime in Florida.
Well, let's talk about that, because a lot of our retirees start off with wintering. And then they go back in the summer, and the grandkids get older and older, and they want less and less to do with grandpa and grandma, and so those snowbird seasons get stretched from 3 months to 5 months to 9 months to,
full time.
Full time. So especially you having that perspective of both areas. I've never lived in Florida. I've been there for vacation multiple times. I think a lot of the people might argue that like they like Arizona for year-round living better, even with the extreme heat of the summer, just because you're always dry. You don't ever have the seasonality of living with humidity.
Yeah, honestly, I think probably the biggest difference between the two is truly the weather. And that would be the main reason I think that most people choose one or the other. And yes, I would agree that there are definitely some people that feel that way, but honestly, there's people that feel the other way too. I've had clients from Phoenix, from Southern California, from New Mexico that have moved to Florida specifically because they said it's too dry. and they just like that dryness just sucks the moisture out of your body. Like, people thought I was crazy when I moved to Florida and I was constantly walking around with a water bottle, and I'm like, because if you don't walk everywhere with a water bottle in Phoenix, you die. Not really.
Yeah, but it's not really. It's wonderful. Like,
no, you know, it's a very different climate. It's dry. Yep. It's arid versus the humidity, and I mean, honestly, that and it's two different color palettes. Okay. Like, what a lot of people don't, they talk about it, but you don't realize it, is what you're seeing in Arizona versus what you're seeing in Florida are two different color schemes.
Yeah. Arizona
so
obviously
it's
is
all warm colors.
Right.
In Arizona. In Florida, it's all cool colors. So it's the blues, the greens versus the reds, the oranges, the browns, so like your whole landscape is totally different.
Yeah, you know, it depends on too which part of Arizona. Like,
sure.
When I first got there, I was surprised big time of how different, even within the Phoenix metro, the color palette could be. Like up in Scottsdale and North Scottsdale, those kinds of Phoenix, they definitely have a lot less water resources to go around. But out in the East Valley, you know, we're talking Gilbert and Chandler, Sun Lakes, which is really popular, 55 and up neighborhood down there. Yep. Green is everywhere. You'd be shocked. And the reason for that, you might not know because you kind of lived in the Phoenix area as a kid.
Yeah, and it's been a while since it's grown.
30 years ago, that whole area of the Phoenix metro was hay fields and it was all irrigated farmland.
Yeah, I remember.
Massive amounts of water resources. Well, today, instead of growing, you know, alfalfa for cows, that's pretty much gone now. There's a couple of random spots, but it's, you know, 95% of it is now houses. Yep. All that water resource is now used for beautiful landscaping and palm trees and beautiful green golf courses with like full-on grass, whereas some of the golf courses in other parts of the Phoenix metro, you've got the green and you tee off, you got the green and a couple spots and you got literal gravel in between where the fairway on.
Right, yeah, I mean, I remember playing golf in Phoenix and a number of the courses, and it's like you miss the fairway and you're going looking through the rocks and watching out for rattlesnakes and scorpions. Yeah, that can happen, and that's a real thing. Which I'm a terrible golfer, so I'm almost always looking in the rocks.
Oh man. Depends on where you want to golf. Of course, both areas, huge golf communities.
Yes,
obviously.
absolutely.
Let's talk about the weather some more. Humidity obviously one, but what about hurricane season? Like, what's the deal? Because Arizona,
well, you don't have to worry about that. Obviously, you don't have hurricanes there.
No hurricanes.
You don't have any water.
Yeah, no, I mean, we have the monsoon season, which if you're curious what a monsoon looks like, it's basically like a short burst rainstorm. Check out some of the YouTube videos, not on my channel, but it's definitely something fun. It usually only happens in the summer months. But yeah, what about floods, flood insurance, hurricanes? I mean, I see a lot of stuff on TV. I've never been in Florida during a hurricane, but how does that compare? Like, how do people manage that and deal with that? Because frankly, that's not even a thought for people that come to Arizona.
Sure. Well, flood insurance maybe should be, because y'all do have flash floods, and those will be surprising. They happen every once in a while. But in terms of the hurricanes, yes, they're a thing. The nice thing about hurricanes, if you can call it a nice thing, but compared to other natural disasters, you get a lot of heads up notice, like advance notice. Okay. We know a week in advance that a hurricane's coming, and yes, it can change exactly where it's gonna hit and all that, but rarely is it a significant surprise where it's gonna hit. It's either coming up the East Coast or the West Coast of Florida. Yeah. One way or the other, it's coming up one side or the other. I'm in Southwest Florida, so we've got the Gulf Coast, and so sometimes they come around and we get them, which we've had a couple big ones in the last few years, the last 5-7 years or so now. We've had two, but we had noticed that they were coming. Yeah, we didn't know exactly where they were going to make landfall and all that, but if you're in the general area, get on a plane and go. Get out in advance. For sure. And don't worry about it. You have insurance to cover the issues if there is an issue later on. Yeah. But in terms of flood insurance, it's your mortgage. If you financing, your mortgage company is going to require you have flood insurance if you're in what they call a high-risk flood zone, where you're likely to have significant flooding if there's a big storm surge. And it depends on the type of hurricane, time of day when it hits and all that. If sometimes they cause a lot of flooding because of storm surge, sometimes they cause flooding because they bring a lot of rain with them. Yeah. Sometimes, but not always.
So a question that I can think of, if I was in Minnesota, especially if I'm just in Florida for the winters. How do you manage your property from Minnesota that you're not at? Because most of these hurricanes don't happen during the time of year.
Summer.
It's during the summer when you're not there usually. So how do you deal with that? Like, I mean, your house is down there. Do you board it up before you leave for the winter, and it looks like junk? I mean, logistically,
So it depends. Most of the time, they don't look bad. If you're in a gated community with the homeowners association, sometimes they have rules against that, where you can't put your shutters up before you leave for the summer.
Okay.
Or you can put them up on the back of the house, but not the front of the house.
Yep.
If you're not in an HOA, you can do basically whatever you want. You can put the shutters on and leave.
Okay.
That's what some people do. There are companies that will come put them on for you.
Okay.
So you can pay somebody. I mean, I paid for some of my clients. Like, they weren't available and they were like, hey, we can send you money, like, but we only have checks. And so I would Venmo, the
Sure.
shutter guy or whatever, and they'll go put them up for $150. They'll put them up, they'll take them back down when they're done.
Okay.
So it's really not that big of a deal. There's companies out there that do it. You can also get impact glass windows if the home doesn't come with them.
Okay.
Like, I'm an investor as well. I'm rehabbing a house right now. I'm replacing all the windows and putting impact glass in. Why?
Okay.
Because then you don't have to mess with shutters.
Gotcha.
It's just the windows are designed to be able to handle the impact of a certain weighted projectile at a certain wind speed and all that. As long as it hits the window, it doesn't do anything.
So in Arizona, one of the things that, talking about windows, never even heard the concept of an impact. Maybe for your vehicle, your cars, things like that, but I guess if there's going to be an equivalent of specialized windows, I think a lot of people, especially if you're rehabbing a home, especially the nicer, homes in Arizona, you're going to want highly efficient glass, especially considering...
Which impact glass is.
Yeah.
And you want the same thing.
Right, exactly. So I guess that's an analogy, but yeah, a lot of the people that come to Arizona that I've noticed and talked to, and a lot of my clients, they wanted to do, which one's better. So like I have a client from Chicago that they spent a couple of winters down in Florida, and then they spent a couple in Arizona and rented and went back and forth for 4 years, and they chose Arizona just because, one, they like the drier weather because it's just more comfortable. You never sweat. I mean, you do sweat, but you don't feel it.
It dries because you don't
dries
realize
before it gets off you, so like you can literally wear the same clothes multiple days in a row in Arizona, and it's kind of normal to do so just because you just don't sweat and get stinky.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, important for a lot of people. But the weather thing is definitely a big one. What about property taxes? I know Florida is very attractive for people. So is Arizona. We get a lot of people from high income tax areas that want to, especially for our year-round people. How is Florida different than Arizona, and how would you compare that from a perspective of not just a snowbird, but the year-round people that are like, okay, I'm leaving my old state and now I'm in this new one? Like,
sure.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know necessarily what the tax situation is in Arizona.
Yeah.
It's been a long time since I earned any income there.
I'll share some notes we can compare together. Yeah.
Yeah, but in Florida, the big draw to Florida is no state income tax.
Yep.
So taxes versus, property taxes versus income taxes in general.
Right.
There's no state income tax, so that's a big plus. Almost everybody gets a raise when they move to Florida.
Makes sense, yeah.
Even as long as they're making the same income, but like, talking retirees and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's actually a huge issue that a lot of the northern states are trying to fight, in that people are coming and buying homes, second home, retirement home, vacation home, or whatever in Florida, and they're saying, well, I'm going to change my registration, I'm going to move my driver's license, I'm going to get everything, my voter registration and all that's going to be changed to Florida.
Yeah.
But maybe they spend the majority of, like, more than half the year up north, but now they don't pay income tax up north because their primary residence, so-called, is in Florida.
Yep, I've seen those guys holding their little sign 183 days in Florida. I mean, we have some of the same people. California is super high tax environment. We get a lot of Californians that move to Arizona for a similar reason, I think.
Yeah, so no state income tax. Property taxes are not too bad. It depends on where you're at, but on average in Southwest Florida, at least, we typically estimate your property taxes tend to be somewhere in the ballpark of about 1.25% of, it's not based on your purchase price of your home, but an easy way to kind of get a rough idea of what you're looking at is about 1.25% of purchase price of the home.
So something really, I think, unique to Arizona, maybe some other states that have a similar system and setup, but when you buy a home in Arizona, your assessed value is locked in and it can only go up a maximum of like 3% per year. So why this is an important kind of consideration to people is that, let's say you buy a house for $600,000 today,
Yep.
and you plan on living in Arizona for the next 20 years.
Yeah.
Let's say 20 years from now, that $600,000 house is now worth $1.5 million.
Right.
Well, you're only paying tax, not on $1.5 million home in the future, but like
the 600 plus
600
3
plus
three.
whatever.
Yeah.
Well, let's call it 900,000 by that point.
Yeah.
So that's a huge tax saver for
Yep.
people. But the cool
Same
thing
in
is,
Florida.
yeah, the crazy thing is though, is it's not just for the time you own it. It's if you sell that house to the next guy, that's locked in for the next owner as well. So basically, the only time you're paying top dollar in Arizona is when you buy a new construction home.
Really?
Yeah. So like,
interesting.
My home in Chandler, Arizona, which is in the East Valley area, I have a taxable base of $330,000, even though it's worth about $800,000 today. It's a 27-year-old
Wow.
home. It's remodeled and everything else.
Yeah.
But when I go to sell this house someday to somebody else, they're going to be locked in at like the same $350,000. So they're going to be paying property tax on a $350,000 house, even though it's worth $800,000-$900,000. So there's a huge advantage tax-wise to buying resale homes or used homes, however you want to call that. But that's a unique thing about the tax structure of Arizona. And then of course, I think this was birthed out of the way back in the 2008, 9 housing recession. They made this rule that if property taxes were to, or property values were ever just plummet, and then the actual value falls below your assessed value, you get locked in at the new lower price, and then it resets from there. So generally speaking, from a property tax perspective in Arizona, most people, unless you just bought a brand new house, are at a very low taxable price, because especially over the last, through COVID and everything else, property values soared. Those people who already had homes that were built prior to that COVID period, they're paying taxes on a very cheap house. And by the way, when you buy a house in Arizona, like I said, the new owner gets that new tax.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Totally unheard of.
Yes. Even in Florida, we have the same 3% as long as it's your primary residence, they have the same 3%. It cannot go up more than that. If it's not your primary residence, they cap it at 10%.
Okay.
So you still get that, but it's just a little bit, it allows a little bit more higher tax base. But it is, when you sell it, the new owner does get reassessed at whatever the current value is. Like I said, it's not sale price, but it's whatever the county appraiser assesses it at. Usually it comes in somewhere around 75 or 80% of sale price.
So Florida, one thing I've never been to the Villages. It's one of the
that's not my area.
That's not your area.
It's
but
not my area, but
we have a lot of the same audience. And, and by the way, if you are thinking the Villages up by Orlando or north of Orlando, he definitely has agents.
I have people, yes. I don't personally cover that area, but I've got plenty of people that I can connect you with. That do.
Right. So 55 and up communities. We have a lot of them in the Phoenix area.
Yeah.
But I've
so does Southwest Florida.
Florida.
The Villages is almost entirely 55 plus.
Yeah, and it's insane. It's like a totally different animal. But what would you say to somebody who's kind of considering a 55 and up community versus just living in a normal neighborhood where you might have kids or other things going on? Like, what are some of the key things going on in the mind of somebody that's wanting to retire in Florida, and they're kind of comparing these two things? And maybe you actually don't even know about these 55 and up neighborhoods. It's a different concept that's not. It's pretty specific to, let's say, Florida and Arizona, a little bit in Texas, I think. But
I was surprised. Actually, I've got some clients that I had no idea that I thought the same thing, but they're in Iowa.
Yeah.
And they live in a 55 and over community. So there are some in different places. I've heard of a few in New York, but they're just not nearly as many of them.
Yeah,
or as robust, I would say, in terms of what they are when they have them.
Yeah, so in Florida, like, what's the kind of character of some of these 55 and up neighborhoods? Are a lot of year-round residents, or is it kind of a ghost town in the summertime, or kind of what's the? I'll start from Arizona. Yeah,
it depends. So typically, the way they design them in Florida, at least, is they have different types of properties within the community.
Okay.
So you'll have condos, you'll have like what we call attached villas, which are it could be anywhere from 2 to 6 units usually.
Kind of like a row house?
Yeah, they're almost always one floor.
Okay.
Because most people coming to Florida don't want to climb stairs.
Makes sense.
So you got condos, you got the attached villas, sometimes they'll do townhouses, single family homes, and then like typically a smaller series single family home and a bigger series single family home.
Yep.
And the purpose behind them is that all different types of people want to be in these communities.
Yep.
So like typically the people that are only here 3-4 months are going to go to the condos.
Right.
Less expensive, smaller, lock it, leave it. They're almost always built with impact glass windows, everything like don't have to touch them. You literally lock the door and go, and you don't see it for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 months.
Okay.
The attached villas tend to be longer stay, but still part-time.
Okay.
So like maybe 4 to 6 months. And they live a little bit more like a single family home. You don't have people above you, don't have people below you. If it's only 2 units, then you have one shared wall and that's it.
Cool.
And the way they build them in Florida, everything's concrete block. So like you've got a huge sound barrier between you, so you're not hearing your neighbor.
Yeah, that's nice.
Basically, the only thing you don't have is windows on that one side.
Gotcha.
And then the single family homes are going to be more full-time or longer stay.
Yeah. You know, that actually doesn't sound
so that's how they set them up. So normally they're not really ghost towns. Yes, they're going to be less people, but it's not going to be completely dead. Like if you want to come full-time, you're the only one there.
Right. Clubhouse is busy.
Right. Yeah, you're going to have people. There's activities still set up year-round. Golf courses typically.
Yeah.
Not all of them have golf courses, but they almost always have like a restaurant, fantastic pool areas, a lot of times like bar out by the pool.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all of it. Florida is designed around outdoor living. Like, yes, we get rain in the summertime and all that, but they just put covers.
Yeah.
You know, you got a covered bar instead of an uncovered bar.
Yeah. Well, even in Arizona, we have covers, but not the rain.
Right.
We have
it's the
shade.
sunshine. Yeah.
We
want the shade.
Yeah. You start to appreciate shade when you live in year-round sunshine, which
you know, I mean, Florida's the sunshine state. So like.
You know what's funny? That is the title, but like, you know, when it only rains 20 days a year in Arizona, I'm surprised that Arizona doesn't have a similar title.
I know.
You know, but yeah, as far as like, you know, considering pros and cons, I hope this is kind of gives you a little bit of an idea. I mean, as far as lifestyle, it's very similar lifestyles. You know,
it's outdoor. It's just different outdoor.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, you know, what do you in Arizona? What is your outdoor lifestyle?
Right. You know, in Arizona, I will say, you know, especially if you're, you know, want to go do hiking in the summertime, I will tell you that a lot of the people that live year round, you know, it's a great, you know, way to get out for the weekend. It's a 5-hour drive out to San Diego or a 45-minute flight. You can drive 2 hours north, 2 to 3 hours north. You're up in Sedona or Flagstaff, which is a significantly higher elevation, so you can get a lot cooler, like 20 degrees cooler. Even.
Oh yeah.
So if it's like, you know, if it's 100 degrees or even an extreme, like in July, 4th of July this last year, we hit a record. It was 116 degrees Fahrenheit, which we had our mister system on. We were in the pool and we had a shade over us, and we literally stayed outside all day long. It wasn't miserable and uncomfortable, which is crazy to think about with those kinds of temps. But you know,
Florida, at least in we're far enough south in Florida that we almost never see 100 degrees.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, it's just
we see, you know, 98% humidity.
Right. So after watching this video and us just, you know, bouncing around these ideas, if you're still kind of unsure about how, you know, the weather especially might affect you, because, you know, both areas have good airports, both areas have great transportation. I can't speak for Florida, but I know in Arizona, the reality is public transport, not really a thing. You better have your own car to get around.
Yeah, same in Southwest Florida.
But there's parking lots that are built around cars and car culture. So if you're coming from like New York City where you don't have a car, or maybe you don't even have a driver's license, you're gonna have to get a driver's license. Or you're gonna have a very big Uber bill. I'll just say that.
But it's a heck of a lot cheaper to have a car in this, you know, in Florida and Arizona.
Yeah. You know? It's everywhere. And the entire infrastructure in place is built around easy parking, getting in, getting out. You know, it doesn't really matter. But yeah, I mean, one thing you might want to, you know, check out, and either one of us can help you with Arizona or Florida. You know, the whole try before you buy thing. A lot of people decide that they'll just rent for the first winter, and we're absolutely able to help you find, you know, a suitable rental. We can kind of point you in the right direction of which, you know, based on things that you like to do. If you're a golfer, you know, both of us have our ideas of the best areas for golfing. If you're more of like shopping and going out to eat and socializing with your friends, and maybe you're not the most like physically active person, there's definitely neighborhoods and spots. A ton of that. So I'm gonna put my number right here. You can give me a call if you want to reach out to Jerry. His number is going to be on the other side of the screen here or in the description below, wherever that's going to go once we get this posted. But yeah, definitely reach out to either or both of us. You know, if you have questions about moving to or living in Southwest Florida, Phoenix, we got you covered. And until the next video, guys, we'll catch you in the next one.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, man.
Appreciate you doing this with me.